Thank you all for your attention now and giving your attention to someone who, I bet you didn't know, was trained as an opera singer. Welcome, Ken Singer.
No way. No way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, with that last name, you know, you have to lean into it. Good thing I wasn't named Shit Starter, because that probably would be more accurate. So good to see you all. I understand there's 200 students in this class.
You understand correctly.
So it looks like about 70 of you guys decided not to hang out in the sun and be in class with me today, so I appreciate you guys coming. I was not the best student when I was here. So when it was sunny, I was usually outside. So it took me 7 years to finish at Berkeley, because the time that I was here was the dot-com boom, and all of my friends and I left school to start companies. And then when the dot-com boom ended, we all came back to finish up. So it took me about 7 years on and off. Good thing is, back then the residency requirements only required you to be in the state of California working for a year. So when I came back, things were much cheaper. So that was the benefit. I convinced my parents that's why I dropped out of school, so to make it a little cheaper. Can you guys all hear me? I'm not sure if this mic is...
Yeah, John, it's a little bit low.
I mean, I'm trained to project my voice anyway. It's been quite a long time since I was trained on that, but you guys can hear me in the back? Great, okay. All right, so I'm gonna talk to you guys about a particular way of looking at innovation, but before I do, I'd love to get a sense from all of you what you've learned so far this semester in this class. What has stuck? What are some phenomena or quirky, lessons or philosophies or, things that people have shared in this class that have stuck with you? Anything you want to share? Because that'll help me kind of help guide the conversation today. Nothing has stuck? Any speakers that had said something that made you either think twice or?
There's a mic right here.
Oh, good.
I took this class last semester, and then a speaker, I remember very vividly, he was talking about TAM expansion. It was Shervin Pishavar. That kind of opened something in my mind. That was something that
TAM expansion. Okay, good. Total addressable market, how you can expand that by interesting marketing exercises. Yeah, and anything else? Thanks, Yavuz. Anything that's stuck? Yes?
When Kurt Kuta came and spoke to us about, sorry, I probably didn't say his last name correctly, but when he came and spoke to us about kind of what he's done in his career, and he said that getting the right perspective is worth 20 IQ points.
Okay.
That perspective is an unfair advantage. I thought that was a good motto to have for going toward. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Why are you taking this class? Some of you, certificate, right? Helps you with a certificate. It's a Changemaker course, all sorts of things. But intellectually, what were you hoping to get from the time that you were going to spend in this classroom in front of people who have been through some stuff? What were you hoping to gain from that moment with these people? Anything? Yeah.
I would say inspiration. It's also interesting because we've heard a lot of AI stuff. So
yeah,
modern, I guess, modern takes on what's going on. Okay.
Yeah, AI. That's so. Raise your hand if you're a senior this year. Okay. Congratulations. Some of you. I was a senior for several years, so hopefully you'll be graduating before 7 years. When you started, which was, 22, 23, we're still masking up, all sorts of things. Were we talking about AI that much? See how quickly the world changes just in the time, 4 years here, the conversation changed. So many of you may have been a CS major going in, and now you're an AI person, right? Somehow what you are about has shifted because the world has changed its focus on something else, right? The things that you thought were golden job, absolutely no chance that you're not going to get a job because that you're in this major, that has shifted in less than 4 years. I have had students this past year who would have been guaranteed a job at Google. They couldn't even get an interview, right? They're incredibly talented, but they couldn't do it. They ended up having to create their own opportunities, and they're doing fantastic now. But these pathways are no longer guaranteed because shifts happen so quickly. And that's something that I want to talk to you guys about today. And what today's the last day of class for you guys, right? So maybe, if I'm successful here, I will have left you with something for you guys to think about as you guys go off into your careers next year at Cal or back to another university if you're an exchange student. But my hope is that something will stick. Something that I will have said here today will stick with you as you go on to go and change the world, as this is a Changemaker class. And hopefully some of the lessons that I've had, you don't have to repeat, because the best lessons are the ones that you learn the hard way. And the most refreshing thing for us is to pass that knowledge off to you so you don't have to make those same mistakes. Go make your own, right? Okay, so real quick. Oh, you already did the slide, right? Nice picture, but so today we're going to talk about shifts. Shift happens, okay? You guys are in the midst of a massive shift that we all know. About 4 years ago, we were dealing with COVID, which was another huge shift. You're going to see that shifts are a particular way of looking at the world that's outside of you that has an effect on you, whether you like it or not. It is unavoidable, these shifts, right? If you look at the gas prices today, we did not control that, right? Someone made a decision, some actions were made that led to you having to deal with that shift that occurred, okay? And that's really the theme today, is to think about the stuff happening around us that can afford us opportunities and also foreclose on opportunities. But those are the same things. Those are doors, opening and closing, okay? So just start out, my journey here at Berkeley, I was much younger then. I am an entrepreneur, a recovering entrepreneur. I've been through this cycle many times. The last company I started, the first few died. They sucked. They all crashed and burned. I lost a lot of money for other people. But my last company was a successful exit for my investors and some of us who exited early. I am also a university educator, so I teach classes like the summer program that Vicky talked about. But many of the SCET courses that you might be taking are ones that I helped design or I created at the beginning of my journey here. And I also teach around the world in other universities and trying to popularize the way that we teach here in other universities that are looking to train entrepreneurs. I am also an innovation consultant, so I work with governments and companies on how to become more innovative, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And I also consider myself an innovationist. So I do these talks all the time, and people call me a futurist, and I recoil at that name, because I'm terrible at predicting the future. Actually, I'm pretty good at predicting something's going to happen. I'm terrible with the timing. So don't ask me for stock tips or anything that is financial, because I'm terrible at when it's going to happen, but I'm pretty good at understanding what I think is going to happen. Now, an innovationist is different from a futurist in this particular way. A futurist looks at the future and says, this is how the world is going to look. An innovationist looks at change and says, I see value in these little things that are happening, these changes that are occurring in the world. And the people that came here to speak to you this entire semester, that's what they were imparting to you. The things that they saw, that they either regret not doing something about, or that they leaned into and it allowed them to create a multi-billion-dollar company because they were paying attention to certain shifts and they took action when they saw it. Okay, and that, again, this is the theme throughout this lecture. So who wants to define what is innovative? It's an adjective, right? What is, when something is innovative, what does that mean? Right there?
You use your creativity to fix a problem.
Oh, okay, yeah. So using your creativity to fix a problem. Great, that's a great definition. What else? What's another definition for innovative, when something's innovative? Yeah?
I would say that it's original.
Original, yes, novelty. Exactly. What else? Pushing the boundaries. Pushing the boundaries, yes, yes. This is, because this is the known space and we're pushing past the known space. Exactly. So innovative just means it's novel. It's different. It hasn't been done before. We're moving into new space, right? In fact, not only are you moving into new space, you're moving into new language. When you create something new, by definition, you're creating new language. There was no word for it. Why would you need a word for it if it didn't exist before? So you're pushing boundaries of intellectual space as well as actual product space. We did not use the term LLM before, right? Cognitive computing, we used that term, but now we know what it means. It's not Watson playing Jeopardy. It's actually something else, right? So machine learning, now that's become common vernacular. That's language that had to be created. Think about what we're saying about machines. We're saying that they are learning. We have anthropomorphized something that is bits and bytes, and we say it can do human things. We are creating new language as much as we're creating new ideas. And that's what innovative is to create newness, okay? But that is very different from from innovation. Innovation is about value. So when you hear in business, that innovation is going to make us a lot of money, or that innovation is going to revolutionize our business, it means we now see value in this new thing that's been created. We can see that creating value for someone. That could be financial. It could be time. It saves people time or makes life more pleasant. Like if you put your phones away, right? When you guys talked about serotonin and dopamine cycles, the phone, by just virtue of not using it, you might get value back, right? So innovation is about value. And what an innovationist does is attend to where value is being created and value is being extracted, okay? And the places to look for that are shifts, and I'll talk a bit about that in the next slide. This, by the way, is how we typically teach entrepreneurship. If you go to any other school, they'll usually use some kind of canvas. They'll say, hey, go disrupt an industry, go disrupt something, right? And that's what your big business is. Go disrupt the taxi business, go disrupt the Yellow Pages, go disrupt something. My point in all of this is that the world does not need you to disrupt anything. It's already disrupted. Don't go out and try to change something. The world is already changing. Disruption is the new normal. You live in a world in which every day you wake up and you're like, oh, Brent oil prices are up 20% today. Like that's massive, right? These disruptions happen that you need to attend to and not create because, well, if you see where there's disruption, you see opportunity. These are all companies that were started during economic disruptions. Depressions, recessions, all these companies happened during that time, were started during that time. Now, they're some of the most lasting, strong companies in the world. Think about how difficult that must have been to start a company during a time when capital wasn't flowing and people weren't buying products. But for some reason, during those times, this seems to be not only possible, but seems to be where this happens, okay? Now, I talk about shifts. I want to give you some details what I mean by shifts. A shift is something that happens around you that is typically permanent in a particular direction and creates a whole new set of realities, okay? So I'm going to talk about 5 different ones and then give you a couple examples. So the first is environmental. Look here, you live in California. This is a common thing. We have storms that come through, right? Look at the people in the front there. There are what we would call losers. Not that they're, losers as people, but they have lost everything. They have lost in this event. But look at the people behind there. They now have $1 million views without having done anything to earn it. Shifts give and they taketh away, and sometimes it can be arbitrary, right? So this is why you need to be paying attention because you have no control over them. Now there are technology shifts, like this company, Uber, could not exist without a couple different shifts. One is cloud computing, right? GPS on the phone, smartphones that were fast enough on the internet, right? Touch screens. and the ability to coordinate at real time millions of drivers and millions of passengers and set their prices and their routes and all of the kind of predictive things almost instantaneously to connect these people, right, around the world. Without those technological shifts, you could not have this company. So notice, it seems like when there's a big shift, it allows for innovation to occur. There is a pattern here. Shift allows things to happen. Now, it's not a foregone conclusion Uber was going to win, right? It doesn't mean you're going to win. It just means now it's possible to do this work. It's possible to play in this game, okay? There's a legal shift. Now, this is, raise your hand if you're European, okay? So you guys know GDPR, right? Americans, you might have tried to go to certain websites and they keep saying, privacy, press this button for privacy stuff, right? We didn't have that before. The reason we have that is because that website wants to be GDPR compliant for European users. And so they just universalized that privacy button. But they passed some regulation. I don't know if it's a law because Brussels kind of weird democracy there. They just decided they're going to protect people's privacy by having this rule that you had to give people the ability to opt out of some of the data collection that they do. Now, once they passed that regulation, hundreds of little companies popped up all over Europe to help large companies comply with this law because companies like British Airlines lost $30 million in fines for not having their website GDPR compliant. So with every law, a law creates new winners and new losers. This is why Amazon has an army of lobbyists in DC to make sure that they never lose in any of the laws that are going to be passed. Because they know laws create shifts of power. Someone else is going to have to pay, or they're going to have to pay, right? And in fact, there's a whole cottage industry of staffers in DC who insert little lines of law into these huge omnibus bills, these 1,000-page bills that you guys hear about. They'll put some line in there knowing that no one will read it. None of the senators, because they can't even see because they're so old. And then the representatives, we don't even know if they can read. So no one's paying attention. So the thing gets passed and these staffers quit their jobs and they start a company to weaponize that piece of law that they inserted in. If you look at a lot of the healthcare companies, that is exactly what happened with Obamacare. When they passed that, there were all these lines of law that these companies commercialized. I'm not encouraging you to go to DC to insert law in there, but my point is this is real stuff that people are doing because they understand that there are shifts that are embedded into law, okay? Now, there's a third kind. This is, raise your hand if you use TikTok. As most of you won't admit, you won't use TikTok's a thing, right? I downloaded this when it first came out, and I just had to stop using it because I lost like 2 hours the first day that I had it. So I realized this is not going to be good for me. But they have figured out how to lock into your dopamine cycles. They're brilliant at it. Some of you have seen people talk about this. But TikTok was only possible because of a cultural shift. There was a company called Vine. Anyone know about this company, Vine? Yeah? Where you did a 6-second video, right? It got a little bit popular and then it died. And TikTok came along with almost the same kind of thing, but years later, and it became a rage. My contention is the reason that there was a change in that is because a new generation, your generation, loves to be famous. This whole idea of being an influencer became a thing. And even the shyest people that I know will do some TikTok dance to put it on TikTok, right? Because there was a cultural shift that said, I want to be a performer. It's okay to be a performer, not just to be a consumer of content. Now, when you have a shift like this, the new winners and losers look very different. The winners are these influencers, people like you who could just spool up 1 million followers, right? But the losers are the brands that have spent millions of dollars trying to get you to be loyal to their brand. What prevents an influencer to say, hey, stop drinking or stop eating, do you guys see this whole thing about vital eggs? Apparently they're no longer as organic as they claim. At least that's what my YouTube channel keeps telling me. And those influencers, each having 1 million followers, have actually affected the stock price of Vital Eggs because they have influenced people to stop buying those eggs. Suddenly the power is shifted, right? There's new winners and then there's new losers. Now, those of you who study economics or business, you know this particular shift, this market shift, because this is what you typically study. It's something that an industry does or a business does, and it creates some kind of weird externality. Well, Amazon, many years ago, decided that they were not just going to sell their own products, they're going to be a marketplace like eBay to help other companies sell on their platform. Now, this became very popular. Like companies like Canon or Minolta, they started selling their cameras on Amazon. One day they woke up and said, wait, our customers are showing up at our website, doing all the research on cameras, and then we're sending them to Amazon to buy our cameras, and we're paying Amazon a 20% tax, basically, for marketing, but we got the customer. Why are we paying Amazon to do this? So what they did was, why don't we create our own e-commerce store? Now, a company called Shopify recognized that companies were going to not want to pay this Amazon tax, and they created very quietly a platform to let these companies be able to have their own store. They anticipated this shift away, this anger towards Amazon's fees, and now Shopify is a multi-billion-dollar company, right? Because they anticipated the shift away from Amazon. Think about all of the other things happening in business where there's shifts going on with these big companies. In those shifts are multi-million-dollar companies, okay? And possibly unicorns, if you can anticipate some of these shifts. Now, here is the quiz portion of the lecture. So Airbnb, what shifts had to occur in order for Airbnb to be a thing? To be a successful business. Yes?
It's similar to Uber. There's an iCloud bubble. There's having to do with internet. There's having access on your phone, vacant properties, and then there's also property values going up, and a lot of people buying up a ton of property.
Okay, so that's recent. So the buying up, like corporate, like hedge funds buying up property, that's in the last 10 years. But Airbnb started becoming a thing when? So timing is important. You're onto something about the property, but it's before then.
2008.
What happened in 2008?
Stock crash, subprime loans.
Yes. What are subprime loans underpinning?
Extremely low housing costs.
So, exactly, houses, right? Loans, house mortgages, right? Underwrite people owning houses, right? And that crashed. Now, Americans are notoriously, we're friendly, but we don't like having strangers live at our house. Like that wasn't a thing. I know in Europe, in certain cultures, it's open and people will invite you to stay and have dinner at their house. But in the US, we're pretty closed, right? But in 2008, when there was a housing meltdown, people said, well, either I Airbnb and make money off of my house or I lose it. And there was a whole I believe a cultural shift that occurred there that made it seem more palatable to be able to just share your home. So there had to be a cultural shift, but there was a market shift that happened right before that allowed or that forced us to change our culture, okay? How about this? Ryanair, those of you who have flown in Europe, Ryanair is basically a bus in the sky. If you've ever flown it, right? It's glorious. It's an Irish airline, okay? They don't even lie about it. They're like, if you fly us, just know it's not gonna be awesome. It's just like we're gonna charge you for everything, and everyone knows it, right? It's just pretty brutal, right? By the way, I did this presentation with a bunch of execs from Ireland, and I made that joke, and he was a former executive from Ryanair, so I've learned a little bit to tone that one down, but man, I've had the worst experiences. Okay, raise your hand if you have flown Ryanair. Raise your hand if you haven't flown Ryanair. Okay, I guarantee you most of you who say you haven't flown Ryanair have flown Ryanair. because the reason you have to pay for peanuts or your chair or extra luggage or any of that stuff is because that's part of their business model as to why they can charge so little and has forced every other airline to have the same experience. That's why you have to pay for water on a Lufthansa flight, is because they can't compete with Ryanair unless they do. So Ryanair is, I would contend, to be the most powerful airline in the world. It has influenced your experiences on every flight that you've ever taken, okay? Because of their abilities to scale. Now, what is the shift that allowed Ryanair to exist as what it is now, the most powerful European airline? What do you think had to have shifted? You've seen the slide.
No, I haven't.
You haven't?
I'm guessing. I think like a shift from like family travel and like traditional travel to like younger people solo traveling and going smaller, shorter distances.
Okay.
More frequently.
But why would they be able to do that?
Because the prices are so low.
Okay.
So they can afford it.
They could afford it. Okay, so there's a cost component where let's inductively kind of piece that together. So there's a cost component. But why? What shift had occurred? Now, by the way, those of you who plan to be in innovation, this is the kind of thinking you need to be doing. When there's a question like, well, why is that? You need to be starting to think logically, like, how could that be? The reason why is because this is how you discover an idea to build, right? Is to go through that process. You can't ask ChatGPT for the answer because you won't be exercising that part of your brain looking for the reason. You got to back into it. It's the primary skill of an innovator is to figure out why. So what other theories? Yes?
I'm just guessing here, but maybe like a shift in working hours, that people have
Oh,
more
interesting.
time for holidays and vacation.
Okay, Europeans are notorious for their 6 to 8 week vacations, so it's always been that way. I think it's in the constitution in France. So that hasn't changed. It's a good thought.
Like, I know that some governments are exploring 4-day work weeks, basic working weeks, like in Finland, I guess.
Yes,
But it's
they're also
like-
very adamant about their vacations as
Yeah.
well. But that has always been a cultural norm to have set aside the summer, to go up to Lapland and be with your family. So good. What's the shift? Yeah. Ooh, we're getting someplace. Part of the EU. So when did Ryanair start really becoming a powerhouse? Don't Google it. Don't ChatGPT it. Let's try to figure this out. Yeah?
Was it the 90s?
Yes.
So the fall of the Soviet Union?
No. No. But it has something to do with the geopolitics of that region. Yeah, of the European region. What else? Yes?
Was it around the Brexit?
That's true. So Brexit was, believe it or not, that was recent, 2016. I know you guys were like 8, some of you. But Brexit was 10 years ago. This is where like in the 90s. So good. Because Brexit actually made this complicated, and I'll explain that in a second. But good, something like Brexit. What kind of shift? You can just say the kind of shift. Yeah.
Like when the, I guess, European Union happened and the countries had to use the euro to say like all the countries use the same currency.
Oh, so close.
European Union in general, like there's less permission to like go immigrate, or not immigrate, travel into another country without paperwork.
Yes, there is. So part of it is the ability to move between countries freely without visas. That was one part of it. So good. You pieced half of it together. What else? What kind of shift? Remember we talked about 4 kinds of shifts? 5. What kind of shift could have happened?
Is it related to working from home and being able to work from home anywhere in Europe?
That's more recent. I would say maybe in the last 10 years. Certainly since COVID has been more. But no, this is, there is movement, but there's a particular kind of shift. It's a legal shift. So before the EU, so EU, there are things, the first two things the EU really did that made Europe feel like Europe was the euro, to make one currency, right? The other is this open skies idea, which is before, if you were an Irish airline, you could only fly out of Dublin. So you could have a plane. If I wanted to go from Malaga to, say, Torino in Italy, I'd have to go from Spain to Dublin, because it's an Irish airline, and then from Dublin to Torino. When they passed these 4 different regulatory changes, deregulation in the EU, which is rare, but when that happens, now an Irish airline can go from Malaga, Spain to Torino directly without ever touching Ireland. This is why you can go from Rome, Linate, and then show up what you think is Paris, but it's actually freaking like Beauvais, right? And you're like, oh, I thought I was in Paris, but I'm actually in Brussels. And you're a Portuguese airline, you can do it, right? So this is like, these changes are real because now Ryanair can fly anywhere in Europe without ever going to Ireland, using their business model and how much they pay their employees, which might be a lot less than Air France, that's required by law or regulation to pay their flight attendants a certain way. This is why all the national airlines basically went broke, because they could not compete with Ryanair's ability to do all of this. They also did some really clever things. I'm not going to discount that. They did clever things, but they could not exist. Their business model of flying to these different cities could not exist without those legal shifts. That made it possible. That's how powerful shifts are. It makes something that was never possible before possible, or things that were possible before not possible. These two companies were going public at the same exact time in 2020. They filed their S and they went, say, we're going to go public in a few months. And then overnight, one company became worth more than almost every airline in the world combined. And the other one became worth less than zero. Multi-billion dollars less than zero. This became a massive red hole. Yeah? COVID. This is right. So good one. That was, I think I served that one up to you. So I'm glad that was, thank you for dunking that for me. Yeah, Zoom. Because we couldn't fly anywhere to meet anyone, the closest we could do that is through Zoom. This became your airline. This is how you teleported to some other place because we couldn't do it physically, right? And then WeWork, you swear we're supposed to go work together, couldn't work. We don't work because they owned all these, these actual business, the buildings, they owned all of these leases that they couldn't get out of, and every month they were hemorrhaging hundreds of millions of dollars. Plus their CEO was a little bit shady. That didn't help either. That's a different story. That should be in the ethics portion of this class. But yeah, overnight, shifts giveth and they taketh away. And we can't fully control them. Now, what happens, like in COVID, right? What we call an extinction level event. Something so massive of a shift that it can destroy everything, every species out here, every kind of company. And that's what COVID was. It seized up the whole thing. It's a systemic shift, right? It affects everyone, and we don't know exactly how it's going to shift everything. But one thing we do know is that big companies during this time cannot use their advantages. In fact, the advantages flip. They become disadvantages. Huge companies have huge liabilities at this point. They still have to pay you. They're on contract to pay your salary. Doesn't matter if you can't come to work, they still have to pay you, right? And in Europe, they couldn't let people go, right? Because they had all of these guarantees. A massive shift makes big companies also blind, because what big companies do is they take their billions of dollars and anticipate where the market's going to go, and they make huge investments. We're going to move into this market. We're going to move into Brazil. We're going to move into Argentina. Well, all of those plans are broken now because you cannot predict where the market's going to go now because the shift is so huge. Now, I would call this a black swan, but if you were to ask Nassim Taleb, who popularized this term, he would say it is not a black swan. You guys know what a black swan is? It's an event that we never imagined could actually happen. all swans are white. And so they said, oh, black swan can never happen. Genetically, it's not possible. Until somehow one day they saw a black swan. It turned out to be possible, right? It's something that we did not imagine to be possible, but actually ends up existing, okay? And we can talk about our politics in this way as well, right? A lot of the things around us that are happening today that we could not imagine to have happened has happened, right? Check out diesel prices. I never imagined I would be paying that kind of money. So he would say that this is not a black swan because we have had a pandemic almost every 100 years. The last time we had one was 1918 or 17. It was, right at the World War I. That was almost 100 years ago. It was almost to the T. We should have known this is going to happen at some point, right? He also says that if you didn't anticipate it, it's a black swan to you. So I'm going to tell you it was a black swan to me because I didn't see it coming. Now, and part of it is, to my defense, we had avian flus and all sorts of things that could have been the pandemic, and it was crying wolf. So when this came along, I didn't imagine this one was going to be it, but it was. Now, in an all systems impacted shift, lots just goes sideways. Now, I was asked to put together slides. We shut down in March. I was asked to put together slides in about April, May, to talk about what I thought was going to happen during the pandemic. So this is my future predictions that you're going to see. Some of them are accurate, and some of them didn't turn out the way that I thought they would. Now, the first thing I said, okay, look, people can't go to the store. Demand's going to die. We can't buy anything, right? So this is going to be huge. Demand is going to go away. Companies are going to collapse. Well, I didn't know about toilet paper. So it turns out, during a pandemic, we will go to Walmart and fight with guns for the last roll of toilet paper. America, right? So I was wrong on that front. I should have bought Charmin stock, right? I didn't know that was going to be it, right? Quirky. Also, by the way, Amazon and Meta, all these companies nearly doubled their staff because no one was going to the store. So Amazon was delivering all this stuff for us. So somebody won, right? And by the way, all the people being laid off from Amazon, I don't think that's because really of AI. They just grew too fast, and they're using AI to kind of clean house a bit. But that's what a lot of these tech companies did. They really overhired during this COVID period, okay? Now, second thing is risk aversion. I thought, okay, businesses are going to probably reprioritize, and they're going to shut down different business units. And that's actually a lot of what happened. In fact, some of our partners at Berkeley shut down. They decided they're not going to send students. They're not going to do partnerships because of the potential risk. Third is, of course, travel. Employees can't get to work. All that shut down. That was true. And then this was the part we were really concerned about as entrepreneurship people, capital flight. We thought that no one was going to get investment. And so, I called my friend Bill. He comes here, lectures a lot. He's a VC, international VC that works around the world now. But at the time, he was Silicon Valley, true and true, only invested in the Valley. He said, hey, Bill, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to like Bermuda or Bahamas? I don't know, to just hang out? He's like, yeah, we've been joking about doing that literally. He's like, but it's going to be New Zealand. And it turns out he was right. Everybody seems to be going to New Zealand these days. And he said, yeah, we're not really sure. We're just going to sit it out and see what's going to happen. Okay, that was like May. In 2000. So I called him again. I always check in with people to find out, hey, what's the temperature? And this was, I think, like October of 2000. I said, what's going on, Bill? He said, oh, we just made our first investment during COVID, during the pandemic. I said, really? Oh, that's crazy. What is it? He's like, well, believe it or not, it's a company in India. And we've never met them. We've only seen them over Zoom and taken a look at their code and their vault and just done due diligence remotely. He said, that's crazy because you only invest in companies, he jokes, he's like, I only invest in companies where it only takes me an hour to drive to their office and yell at the CEO because I need to be able to do that. And he said, but if you're in shutdown, it doesn't matter if they're in San Jose or in Bangalore. You can't even tell because you have to be in Zoom. And I started hearing that from other VCs. During COVID, so many of them started investing around the world. And I think that might be a legacy of COVID, is that no matter where you start a company, Silicon Valley investors now are willing to invest. You still have to work really hard, but now it's possible. The shift created an opportunity for international companies to have access to capital, which we did not anticipate, okay? And then the last thing here is broken supply chains. This is still broken. We still have this. When China kept shutting down because of COVID spikes, this just made it impossible to predict if your clothing was going to show up for Christmas. So all these companies had to find other solutions. Now, this is the case study I want to share with you about one particular kind of storyline of the shifts from COVID. Now, this industry is the fashion industry. As you can tell, I am not a fashion person. This is like the Silicon Valley outfit. But my brother is a fashion designer, which is hilarious that we're related. And he works for a company, he worked at the time for a company called Fear of God. Are you guys familiar with that? So he was one of the lead designers there. And he was telling me what's going on, because again, just checking in. What's going on? Educate me on what's happening. Now, the major shift that had happened was the broken supply chain, right? China, you couldn't make anything there. And they were making most of their stuff in LA anyway. But it got weird that they couldn't make things in LA because their supplies were all screwed up coming from China and other places. So the supply chain getting to the factory in LA was broken. So what they ended up doing, right, was they moved their production to Italy and Portugal, where they had access to more of the source materials, and they could do everything there. This is what a lot of companies did in fashion. H&M did this, I think, right? A lot of these big fashion houses moved onshored or relocated a lot of their production out of Asia and into Europe and the US. Now, how many of you have purchased something from Shein? You can admit it, come on now. It's okay. You can make it up to the planet in other ways. It's fine, admit it. Okay, so you guys know what Shein is, right? Right, the people who speak Chinese, it's Shein, right? Shein, it's pronounced Shein. I keep getting different. I've been told it's Shein. Shein, okay. All right, this company came out of nowhere and became this big blockbuster. Guess who's producing all of their clothing? All the factories that used to be making stuff for H&M and all the companies that onshored all of their production to Italy and Portugal. And when they did that, it became more expensive to produce because it's local. And all of these factories were selling really cheap versions of this stuff through a website that had no stores, no labor costs in the US, and they could sell it for a fraction because they didn't have to pay for any of that other stuff, right? The shift that COVID made all these companies that had invested years of training into these factories in China, they moved back home and left China to become their biggest competitor. They trained all these people. And all these people now are competing with them at a scale that they're not prepared for, right? So the ex-vendors become the competitors. Now, think about the technology shift that is happening right now with AI, okay? This is my brother's design. So my brother designed this as a concept that he did while he was at Fear of God. I don't know if it was produced. It looks like a balloon. See, I'm not a fashion person. But it's probably worth, $1,500, $2,000. You can't wear this in LA, so someone's gonna rob you. It's also really hot, so I don't know what the hell you're doing here. But he would spend days designing this thing. He literally walked me through this. I would use some CAD program, some Photoshop to create this thing. And then I would spend a day creating this thing to show what an actual fabric would look like using this design, right? And then I would spend another day doing this one and this one. And then he said, watch this, and he pressed a button, and he had 1,000 variants of the same thing using an AI tool showing every different combination of fabric that each time he would spend a day doing. He's like, I just realized I am out of a job as he was playing with these tools, right? Because this is what a lot of fashion is about creating all these options, all of these possibilities, and then choosing the one that they're going to produce. What if you could just design these at zero cost and then produce different versions of this at virtually no cost to see if you want this version and you want that version and you want this version? What's keeping us from doing that? Because if we did that, then we would have no overage at the end. We wouldn't have to sell things at TJ Maxx, right? Because you got what you wanted. It'd be cheaper and it'd be less costly to the planet, right? So what ends up happening then is if you take this to the next step, it's now not only fast fashion, it is fast couture. You can have instant designs for just you and your body, and I've talked to several startups working on this right now, right? That's using designs that might have been inspired by your favorite influencer. So rather than buying something from H&M or Gap or wherever, you're now buying from your favorite influencer, McBeast or whoever that guy is, or the Kardashians or whatever. They all can have their own brands now instantly. They can partner up with Temu or Shein and have their designs using AI to come up with all these variants that are just for you. And maybe you'll have the most unique piece because you can use AI to make sure that no one else, every single version is different for every single person. So now you have fast couture. This is what the technology shift allows. So I would contend, I did this whole presentation to the fashion industry in Venice 2 years ago. It was silent. I thought it was because my English was a little fast. No, it was like, they're like, this, our industry is screwed. Because I come in like, hey, I bring gifts, your future destruction, right? And this is kind of the line here. That supply chain is no longer a supply chain. It is a demand chain. It is what people want, not what people are supplying. And that is the power of AI. It is allowing for you to be selective as a purchaser, right? The power is shifting. And that is really, I think, something exciting about society, okay? Now, just to recap, this COVID shutdown shifts the supply chain, so people are moving their production back onshore, leaving their previous suppliers with no business, but a whole lot of skills that you gave them over a couple decades, right? And they're hungry. They need to make money. They need to eat. They need to feed their families. So they partner up with all of these companies to sell their skills to you at a fraction of the price. They can now compete with the original retailers literally for an order of magnitude less, which makes you question, why am I paying $20 at this store when I could be paying $5? Because that $15 is about the marketing, the overages, keeping the supplies stored someplace. All of those costs, you don't need to bear them anymore, right? Now the future, as I've pointed out, these TikTok influencers, maybe it's one of you, can use AI to partner with Shein to compete with the brands. And we're going to have, probably in the next couple of years, the first major influencer-driven consumer brand. It could be McBeast, I don't know. It could be someone in this room that's driving purchasing, right? It used to just be, hey, I'm going to just sponsor a brand. But what if you are the brand, right? That's where we're headed here. So in the entire fashion industry, their business model is fully disrupted, just starting with COVID, but now with AI. So if you look at the macro winners of the COVID shift, it's all of these guys. You can't go to the movies, you can't go to the store, you can't go to the library. Well, you never did anyway. You can't see your friends, right? You need to pretend that you're working. You need to entertain yourself. And, you need to talk to people, I guess, or text. You guys don't talk on the phone anymore, right? So it's text, right? All of this stuff just ballooned, right, during this shift, right? Now, so what's next, right? So artificial intelligence is the mother of all shifts. I want you guys to pay attention to this because this is the year of the jerk. Raise your hand if you're a math major. Okay, raise your hand. Aerospace or math? Raise your hand if you're aerospace or math. What does jerk mean?
The derivative of acceleration.
Yes. Okay. Even faculty have asked. Do not know this. We coined. So the first derivative is what? Velocity.
First derivative is velocity.
Yes. Second is
acceleration.
And then third is jerk. So velocity, right, is direction and speed, right? So you can be going consistent velocity. Then acceleration is you're going the rate of change. Suddenly it's going even faster than just linear, right? And then you have jerk that's going even, it's the rate of change of rate of change of rate of change. It is moving so fast that it's jerking. It's like jerk, right? I rickrolled you with this one. But yes, so calculus, we named this actually in the 90s. Do you guys know what the fourth derivative is? Extra points. Jounce, but what's the other word?
Jolt.
Close.
Yeah, it's jerk, jounce.
It's snap.
Snap. Oh, snap after that.
Yeah.
Crackle, pop.
Yeah, it's snap, crackle, pop. Yeah. Yeah. Who says math people aren't funny, right? Right? I guess they're funny. All right, so it's the year of the jerk. It's not just acceleration. And you hear people talking about, oh, we're going to be in an accelerator. AI is jerk. It is fundamental. It's such a hard shift. Everything is breaking, okay? So the rate of change, most innovation has an accelerating effect, but AI can accelerate acceleration. We are seeking the very first solopreneur unicorn. We're talking about that as if that's real, because we've seen how this technology can allow you to code, market, sell, do all this kind of stuff automatically. Automated, right? This is not acceleration. This is something even more disruptive, okay? Now, a shift at jerk magnitude is a crisis. An earthquake is jerking, right? And a strong enough earthquake, and you've jerked it so hard that the buildings collapse. It can be devastating to all the underlying infrastructure, social contract. This is what we're all talking about right now. Jobs, are we going to even have jobs? Economic fundamentals, that even a CS degree might not mean anything. Can you imagine that's what you were talking about 4 years ago? You know, if your parents knew that, maybe you could go be an art major finally, right? But too late for you. You're a CS major, right? May introduce new physics and a new reality. What is up is now down. What is left is now right, right? That is what jerk does. Okay. Now, so I don't want to leave you with this dark thing. So what's the best response? I was asked this. What's the best response to a crisis like this, right? Typically, what companies do is they freeze. They're like deer in headlights. They're like, I don't know what to do. COVID, do we lay everybody off? What do we do, right? The next thing is, okay, let's just cut everything that's not core. We're going to go back to our core, okay? Which most of them did, right? Which is interesting because who came up with the very first real AI solution that everybody was using? It was like a no-name nonprofit called OpenAI. How can something like that come out of nowhere when you have, you know, IBM that's been working on it for decades, right? Microsoft having a skunk works on it. You have a Nobel Prize winner working at Google working on it. And then you have this like YC Y Combinator company come out of nowhere to build this, right? It's because all those big companies cut back during COVID and were paying attention to survival and not to this other stuff. This is why during times of crisis, you have some of the biggest companies born, is because everyone else is focused on their core and they're not paying attention to the new innovative edges. That's the answer, right? You need these crises for you as small people to be able to win. Now, that doesn't mean go destroy the world, right? I said don't disrupt it. It's going to be disrupted on its own. But be ready to capitalize on the shifts that the large companies cannot shift fast enough towards, because they have employees they have to pay, they have liability. Like, you know, during COVID, British Airlines was flying empty flights from London to all over the world, empty. No one flying on them except for the pilots, because if they didn't fly those routes, they would lose their slot at Heathrow. and Qatar and Emirates would get those slots. So they had the liability of flying millions of dollars worth of gas flights to keep those contracts. Big companies cannot move quickly because they have all of these liabilities. But that's why you can win, okay? So they cut back during that time, and then they wake up and they're like, okay, we got to reprioritize and invest. And this is why after a major shift and everyone has pulled back, suddenly you see all these acquisitions, right? And look at all the AI acquisitions that are happening. It's because they didn't invest enough in AI. And so they're now buying up all of those things. This is a very common cadence that happens. My contention is the best response to crisis is sex. For those of you who are sleeping, hopefully you guys are woken up by that. Otherwise, I'm a little bit worried. Since you're college students, that should have a better response than that. So those of you who are in bio, there is a quirky little species called the Daphnia. It is the water flea. So if you go to a pond somewhere and you see these little fleas popping around, that's a water flea. Now, the water flea has a very weird, I consider it weird, property. It has the ability to switch between sexual and asexual reproduction. Okay, so that's weird, right? So think of, the ability to have both is very strange. So think about it. Like if I was standing up here and I had asexual reproduction and standing, and suddenly you saw two of me, which would be weird, right? Black swan event. But also just amazing to have the ability to either do one or the other, right? Now, there are other species out there, molds, algae, that have this ability, okay? Now, asexual reproduction requires less energy than sexual reproduction, because think about it, right? Asexual reproduction is just, I'm hanging out and boom, I split in half. Sexual reproduction for a Daphnia, right? They have to go and find a mate, right? Go hang out at Daphnia bars or go on Daphnia Tinder and figure out who's gonna be the best suitable mate. And that takes a lot of energy, okay, to do that. So because of that, biologists first thought that they would do sexual reproduction only when there was lots of nutrients in the environment because it took a lot of energy to do sexual reproduction. But what they found was the opposite was true. Biologists are constantly humbled by the world's actual explanations, and this is one of them. The curious fact is that sexual reproduction only happens when there's virtually no nutrients in the system. Why is that the case? Who's smarter than a biologist? Why is that the case? It's counterintuitive. Survival? Tell me about this survival.
So to ensure that at least one of them is going to survive in this kind of situation when there's not a lot of nutrients. And if you have bioprocesses in general, you have mutations as well that happen.
Yes, mutations. So this is the answer. When the environment has lots of nutrients, they're like, hey, why do we need to find another mate? We're just good. This DNA is fine. We're just going to keep splitting because the environment's good. When the environment gets bad, that's when you're like, maybe this set of genes won't survive this new condition. So we need to have more diversity of offspring that might be able to survive through this winter that's coming. Right? It is selection. It is survival. Now, sexual reproduction is the result of these new combinations of genes, and it's nature's strategy. Diversity is nature's strategy through these difficult times. Right? That one may be more adaptable to thrive in a new, low nutrient condition. Genetic collaborative innovation is needed during times of crisis. And this is why I suggest for you, during times of difficulty, to meet as many different people as possible to see what kinds of new combinations of ideas and startups and companies and problems that you can solve by virtue of talking to someone who looks at the world differently. That is the key to solving problems. It is not sitting there waiting and getting an epiphany. It is through conversation and collaboration. Okay? Which is why SCET classes are designed this way. This is an anomaly, this lecture thing, but you are learning from people who have been through this. But in other classes, we have you guys really bumping into each other to learn how to solve problems from different angles. you want to be anticipating these shifts as much as possible. Hopefully, when you go home, you guys are going to think about the world through shifts. You'll think, this is a shift that's happening around me. This is a shift that just happened with AI. The more you look at the world through that lens, the more likely you will find an opportunity that no one else has capitalized on because the shift just happened. It's jump ball when there's a shift. You and Google have the same chance of winning that if you jump at the ball at the same time, okay? So shift management in some ways is also risk management. So if you work for a big company, you should be looking at shifts because those things could destroy your business. Ask WeWork how that worked out, right? So ultimately, my key takeaways for you today, and I don't know how much time I use, looks like the full hour, is shifts affect everyone, but in different ways. It is asymmetric. Look at who's going to be the winner and who's going to be the loser. Shifts can invert the business hierarchy. We just talked about it. Big BA has all of this, during COVID, had all of these liabilities. They owned all these planes. Look at the other airlines that did better. They didn't own their planes. They had leases. They could get rid of their leases. They had employees that they could lay off, right? They had that flexibility. And oftentimes, it's during those times that you get new airlines being born, during actually times of stress, because they can get planes for virtually free, right? No one wants a plane at the time. So the bigger the incumbent, the bigger the exposure. New startups have no labor, debt, shareholders, contractual baggage. Shifts, this is the last piece, cannot be avoided, but they can be leveraged. And if you're a startup, they can be what you ride into town, like ChatGPT, to own the market. So startups are uniquely positioned to leverage these shifts, as I mentioned. Shifts threaten existing business models, create openings for you, and startups can move faster to go after these opportunities. So this is my last slide for you. Look for cracks and shifts. Cracks are pre-shifts. With AI, that a lot of pre-cracks are happening. Look at the classes that you're in. AI is infiltrating everything, right? Seek out new and different people to collaborate with and share your unique insights about shifts with each other, with clients. And if you see a new shift that's coming or you think you do, email me, let me know. I am keeping track of them. I'm always curious to see what you all see because we all have different perceptions of the world, and I benefit from your eyes if you guys can see it. And my talk to you here is to give you this instrument, which is to look at the world through this particular lens. And if you see something with your experiences and this lens, please talk to me. I think I would benefit from learning what you're seeing. So thank you, guys. Yeah.
Hi, over here. Thank you for your talk. That was very interesting. I was just seeing all these shifts at the same time, and you talked about a bunch of those. That could be like the energy crisis right now, then AI, robotics looming. We still trying kind of to adapt to the internet because I'm from Germany, and the internet is like this new shift. So I wonder, how do you prioritize the right thing in course of action? Because there's so many things at the same time, right?
That's such a German question. How do I prioritize all these shifts? No, so look, there is no prioritization. It's all coming at you. It's what is most important to you, right? So if you're a big company, you're going to need to have a team looking out for these shifts and knowing which ones are going to be the most consequential to your business. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking for opportunities, look for shifts in places that you care about or that you like, right? You can be, if you're about the environment, then look for places where the environment is being affected by the oil crisis. By the way, the oil crisis is probably going to be the number one driver of EV sales. Even the tax breaks probably wouldn't have meet what's going to happen here because your gas prices are going to stay high, right, around the world. You might also have BYD cars because we don't have enough EVs in the US. They might even let the Chinese come in, right? That could totally change the auto industry too. We don't know, right? But the key thing is find an area that you're passionate about to take this lens and say, okay, what's going to be affecting this industry from outside and what's changing from here? I'll give you one example. I have a student team that's working on a drone technology. And what they've discovered is that there is this whole renewed interest in old mines. Well, why would that be? Well, it's because all these old mines were dug to look for gold and silver, right? And copper maybe. And then they interest in that, or they've run out of that in those mines. But those holes are still there. They're liabilities, they're risks for people to fall into, and they can explode because you can have methane collect in them. But what they've discovered now is we need tungsten. We need, rare earths. And it turns out a lot of those things can be found adjacent or even in the same wells that they weren't using before, or that they've closed up. So to find that out, they're using drones to go down into those places to see if they can restart the mines to mine something else for your iPhone or for your laptop. The shift has gone from gold to new gold, which is rare earths, right? That's a shift. And they stumbled into that. So everywhere in the world is constantly shifting. That's the nature of this thing, right? And with the jerk of AI, it's creating all these crises from healthcare to education. We don't know how to evaluate you. I have a colleague in Sweden. She's going to come to our conference next week. They just did a paper that research. They're at Lund. Lund University is one of the best schools in Europe. And their engineering faculty is fantastic. And she did a study with her colleagues. She's in the industrial engineering department. And so they took several mechanical engineering students who had never taken a single industrial engineering course and said, please take the final for our industrial engineering class. You get to use whatever LLM, AI tool you want. They all passed the test. Never took industrial engineering ever before, but because they had mechanical training and they had this tool, they could pass all the tests. How do we evaluate students at that point? You don't even need expertise to pass a final in another department, right? So that means we really have to rethink what is education. We have to go down to the fundamentals and say, okay, what is it that we're doing here in this room? When I'm speaking, what's happening in your mind? Is this the most effective way for us to share knowledge and for you to learn stuff, right? We have to go back to basics and figure that out because this jerk has fundamentally changed the underlying physics of it all, right? Evaluation might be meaningless. We used to have code review in our challenge labs. We're getting rid of that after this year because, code review just means did Claude do well today, right? We're not assessing you. We're assessing someone in Microsoft or at Meta or whatever coding the LLM. So we're at a very strange place in which everything is shifting. So whatever you're interested in, there's something there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
When it comes to how companies go through the 3 steps, like a deer in headlights, they freeze, then they flight, and then they finally fight by making acquisitions and things like that. How would you make a big company, or is it possible to make a big company that instead is able to be more modular? So when a shift happens, when a crisis comes, they're able to immediately reprioritize and capitalize on it with their resources in a way a startup can't, or another paralyzed large corporation can't.
Fantastic question. I get that all the time with the executives that I work with. And the first question I ask them is, who did you lay off when COVID happened? Who was the first group? So, and when we dig deep enough, they'll say, oh, our innovation team. They literally laid off the people who might have had the keys to getting them out of the problem, have been trained on looking at problems in a different way, of problem solving, because they didn't see that as a necessary group that was nice to have. They misunderstood what innovation was, which is about seeking new value, right? Because their old value might no longer be valuable, right? So you want to invest in your innovation team, not as just nice to have, but it is your risk management department. They are looking at what shifts are happening or will be happening that could be the existential crisis for you, right? So I would make a huge investment in that. Some of you are going to be future CEOs of companies. If anything sticks from this conversation, triple your innovation budget. Make sure that they are tasked with looking for the future shifts, because they're always coming, right? With that said, how do you anticipate it? You can't, right? But as a big company, you're going to want to make sure that you're diversified enough in general, right? And like with this AI shift that's happening, you got to get everyone educated. That's one of the challenges now is instead of educating everyone on AI, a lot of companies are just firing a bunch of people, forcing them to go get a master's degree on AI, and then employing them later. They're essentially leaving that education piece to you to pay for, to retool yourself rather than them doing it for you. That's what I think you're seeing in the Valley with this whole hemorrhaging of engineers. They're all getting, we see it. We see the spike in master's programs here. So they're coming here to get AI training so that they can be employable by someone else. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question on another shift, or I think a shift that is a result of all this AI stuff.
Right.
So like there's so many people that want to become founders and like start startups, and there's also a lot of funding available because it's a race. And so isn't that a shift in itself? And like how is that going to shape our society if everyone thinks that they can work for themselves, basically?
I think this desire to be a founder may not necessarily be a shift, but the result of shifts. So in some countries where the economy collapses, everyone has to become entrepreneurs because there aren't jobs. So there's a shift that's occurred that forces people. I'll give you an example. Finland. Anyone from Finland here? You have some people from Aalto University. Finland. Raise your hand if you've ever owned a Nokia phone. Oh yeah, okay. When you were like 3. It's good. It's fine. Nokia used to be, they joked, Nokia was the most famous Japanese company based in Finland because no one knew that it was a Finnish company. They just thought it was Japanese. But it was the economy in Finland. They were selling 1 billion phones a year before Apple came along, okay? They were massive. They just huge, dominant force, okay? Then Apple just destroyed their entire business model because of the touchscreen phone. And, Finns were like, no one's going to touch this. That's like a child. Who's going to use their finger? And they always got these styluses or buttons, and they were too late to the touchscreen and a bunch of other features of the iPhone. And they died. And then you look at Finland, it is one of the most dynamic startup ecosystems in the world. Even second and third tier cities there have huge companies that have emerged out. Everyone sees themselves, well, not everyone, but a lot of people see themselves as entrepreneurs. Same thing as Estonia. With the shift of the Soviet collapse, they needed to get on their own feet. If you guys look at where the hot spots are for security and privacy technology, Estonia. Why is that? Look at their neighbors, right? So the shifts also form direction. It is not just, oh, we're going to be more entrepreneurial. It's actually what kind of entrepreneurship. Right? Right now, you're from France? Wait, I'm sorry? Morocco. Oh, okay. So we have lots of students from France, right? And one of the funny things about that is the bastion of wine. But apparently now, because of climate change, some of the best wines are coming out of England because the temperatures have shifted and you can't grow certain wines, grapes in France because it's just too hot. That is a massive shift. Can you imagine drinking British wine? Like, I think that as a brand, right? But they're winning awards because of the climate has shifted, right? So this is what I'm talking about. Look at where things are going, right, with these shifts, okay? With the whole entrepreneurial movement, with AI, you're going to end up having lots of people have to be entrepreneurs, because their jobs are going to be displaced, right? Look at a lot of the coders that are being laid off from Meta, Microsoft. I've talked to a lot of my former students. even if they haven't been laid off, they want to leave. And they're going to have this massive blossom of vibe-coded, hybrid vibe and actual coded solutions coming out of nowhere. I have one student who's already making about $100,000 a month with an AI tool that he's built since he's left Apple a couple months ago. So with them laying them off, it might be just like the fashion industry. These companies may have laid off their competitor, future competitor who will come in and destroy them. That's WhatsApp's story, by the way. Yahoo engineers who left created WhatsApp that became worth more than Yahoo when Yahoo was acquired. You don't even know who Yahoo is, that's fine. But my point here is, with every shift, new opportunities emerge. And with this AI job apocalypse, you might have just massive new innovation that comes out.
I think that's all we have time for today. Students can come up and ask Ken some questions after, but if everyone could give a big thank you to Ken for coming in.
Thank you, guys.